Is Black Lives Matter having its Me Too moment? Joining us now, the broadcaster, podcaster, George the Poet. Nice to see you in here, George.
Thank you very much.
Has this level of engagement surprised you?
Not at all. It's very rare that you'll watch someone being murdered for 9 minutes, very slowly. It was obviously broadcast all over, and you have to understand there are significant parallels, disturbing parallels between the Black British experience and the African American experience. 40% of the poorest households in this country are black, whereas only 4% of the country is black. Black and brown people account for half of all young people in jail right now, in a period in which the population of young offenders has fallen by over 2/3 over the past 13 years, with the proportion of young offenders, black young offenders, doubling in that same period, whereas their white counterparts have seen a roughly 70% fall in their numbers in youth offender institutes. So it's very interesting that we have these parallels, and very timely, very appropriate that we stand in solidarity.
That was what I was going to say. Is it about solidarity with fellow citizens in America, or is it about change here? Because you described the video brought out a visceral disgust for people, but you think it's more about a fundamental disillusionment with life here?
I don't think it's either or. It's not solidarity with the American experience or change over this side. There was a young man from my estate that I was in primary school with. His name's Julian Cole. He was, for some reason, accosted by 5 officers outside of a nightclub in Bristol. Not Bristol, Bedford. It was the Bedfordshire Constabulary that was responsible for this. He, in a scuffle, had his neck snapped. He was carried over across the road to a police van, limp, in a vegetative state eventually. Now, it was found out retroactively that he could have been saved from being in a vegetative state. He could have been saved from the brain damage which he incurred as a result of that interaction had the police not kept him in that van for approximately half an hour, which they then lied about in court. Guess how many convictions that debacle ended in? None. There's been no jail time doled out for police in this country over deaths in custody. Also interesting to note that black people are twice as likely to die in police custody as their white counterparts in this country. So this is very real. The need for change is overdue.
Do you see this as I use the phrase, a sort of a Me Too moment for Black Lives Matter? Does this need everyone, as it were, to get what's happening?
It does need everyone to get what's happening. All credit to the Me Too movement. It's been highly educational for myself and for an entire generation, hopefully. It's tragic that 60 to 70 years after the highly publicized civil rights movement in America, we still need to educate and sensitize everyone. You know, you would have thought everyone was aware.
But you're not putting America and Britain on the same footing. I mean, I heard that very moving, horrific account, but our police aren't armed, they don't have guns, the legacy of slavery is not the same. We've had a report many years ago looking at institutional racism, and you would hope reversing or aiming to open that up. It's not the same, is it?
If it's not the same, then you have to explain to me why Julian Cole is not an exception. What happened with Nunu Cardozo? What happened with Edmund DaCosta? What happened with Sarah Reid, who died under very similar circumstances with Sandra Bland in the American context, right? This is contemporary. When you talk about the history of race relations, you have to consider the role of the British Empire, as I've spoken about extensively, on the African continent, and the political and economic consequences of that interaction. What is the situation that we're dealing with today? This is very contemporary, and I hope this is a learning point for many people who think along the lines that you just expressed, that this is an American and not a British issue.
OK, George the Poet.